Okay, so to recap, what we did in the last few sessions, we learned about how to collaborate, and then we picked some examples from starting creating a project by using what we have on Source Labs. Let's see, Source Labs example.
Just a sec.
Or maybe this one.
Did that.
Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Getting started with Selenium.
Yeah. Okay. So we used this example to create our first test, right? And now in this exercise, or rather in the last exercise, we decided about moving the test from here to a page object factory pattern, or sorry, page object model pattern. And today we are going to see what you've done and review the pull request, and see what if there are any improvements.
Yeah.
So let me also show what we had in the past. So this is what we had previously. So we had these 4 tests which have a lot of duplicate code. In fact, there are a lot of improvements that we found out. We list them as issues. But the main goal of this exercise was to at least remove all the logic of test implementation and move it into its own page object class. There are still some areas that you want to take care, but those are for later. So you came up with this pull request, and let's review it. So normally what happens is in the pull request, we will try to give feedback on every minor or major thing, right, Rashmi? So we start with this. So there are 3 files that are changed. Number one, itself, in fact, is the heading itself. I mean, normally the word POM, even though it's page object model, it's reserved for the POM file.
Right, yeah. I didn't think about it, but it was too much, so I just thought,
yeah.
Let me just.
But that's okay. I mean, many people do that actually, but it's just a good idea to just call it page object model because POM means something else. Second thing is, if we see we have an extra spacing, so we will take care of also formatting, functionality, clean code, basically everything that comes under design and clean code, we will give feedback on that.
Yeah.
So for example here, the first thing is extra space, and we want to get rid of any extra space because, well, it just doesn't look very neat when you have those. So that's a minor thing. I created a task for it. The second thing is, yes, even though it is a source demo login, but normally we know that we're working on source demo because it's a part of our project, right? So we don't have to mention it again here. So for example, this just becomes login. Class name becomes only login. Let's go up. I think I should first click on the task. Okay. Third thing is, when we define the elements, it's always a good idea to separate different elements with a space. So for example, now we don't have enough space in any of the elements, so we can add an extra spacing. So add an extra spacing after each field element. And again, I did the same mistake. Control X, first add a task. Cool. Next thing is, in Java, whenever we are creating our fields, so we have fields and we have methods, right? So whenever we create our fields, we should always make them private, because we don't want to expose our fields into our methods. Because what will happen is, at this moment, once you start writing a test in IntelliJ, it will also show you. So the moment you give your class variable name, so let's say login, and you give dot, it will show you all this username and password and everything. But you don't want that, right? You only want to work with methods, not with fields.
Yeah.
So make all.
So you mean variables, right? Variables should not be.
Yeah, we call them fields. So normally these are, for example, if you use something in a method, those are variables. But if you declare them in the class, you call them fields.
Okay.
Make all fields private. And again, first task. Okay, what else? So another thing is in Java, the class name is a Pascal case, and the field names and method names, these are all camel case. So for example, you see here we have called our fields, for example, username and password with as Pascal case. Title is correct and driver is correct, but username, yeah. So let me make another remark. In Java, the class names are Pascal case and field names and method names are camel case. So to rename all fields to camel case. Once again, so that's another one. What else? Let's see. See, source demo login, a driver, this driver, PageFactory, init elements, and test. Okay. Another thing is in Java, it's a common practice that when you want to set a particular field, you say set, for example, username or set password, and when you want to get something, you just say get username, get password. It's just a convention. But
the example where I was referring to also had set.
Okay.
But I thought I was very.
Which is very intuitive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very intuitive because I also used to do that. I used to, kind of create my own conventions. But then over a period of time, I realized if you're working in a team and because people have certain conventions, they are used to of certain things, and then it makes a difference. So we say again in Java, we normally use set field and get field. So we rename our methods to, let's say, set username and set password. Okay, that's another thing. Another thing which I also see is, for example, so if you have a string field and you're passing it as a parameter, it's sort of implied that it's a value. And another thing from the book Clean Code is he always says not to add these extra things, which later becomes a noise, And when you're working with IntelliJ, so let me see if I open IntelliJ. Where is it? Login password PageFactory. So let's say if I want to, let's say, create this, I want to call this method, and you're working on it for the first time, it shows you string username, string password, and let's say if I just give some values, it also shows you these things, which I sort of help a text. So it just makes sense to just call it as username and password, then calling it as value.
Actually, I started with that, but the reason why I added it is I used to get confused between, there are so many times where I've used that word username, password.
Yeah.
So I was a bit worried that it might
mix up things, right?
Mix up things.
And that's,
maybe it doesn't.
And that's very natural, Rashmi, because what happens is even when I started working on this, I used to get confused. For example, if I call it as string password and we have this field password, right? And then you might think which password are we talking about? So
because there's also web element password.
Correct, that's what I mean. So for example, you have this web element password, right? And then you're calling this also as password, and then you can get confused. So this is only when when you're in the beginning, you'll get confused. But normally when you know that, for example, if you have a field with the same name and if you define a parameter, if you call with password, you're calling with the parameter name, you're not calling with the field name. Now what if you want to use the field name? if you want to use the field in some of your methods, you can use it the way you use the driver. You see, you passed a parameter called driver, but you also have a field which was named driver.
Driver, yeah.
And what you want to say was, in this method, you actually wanted to say, whatever driver you are passing from the test, I want to use that driver in this particular class.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, maybe I should also a little bit elaborate on this for the people for whom it is new. So what you're saying is, using this driver, then basically, so you have this driver now, and using this driver, you want to initialize all these elements using the PageFactory elements, right? And if I remember correct, when I was reading about it long back, the way PageFactory does it, it does a lazy initialization. I think what it means is, even if the element is not present, it will not fail your class. So for example, let's say some of the elements are created after you click on a certain element, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it was a direct initialization, this will fail because it will not be able to find that. For example, this is a good example. This lockout error, it only comes when you give a wrong input, right?
Yeah.
If it is trying to find this element, it will probably not even find it because it's dynamically generated.
Yeah.
So that's the cool part about using PageFactory.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming back to the point, it clarifies that, when you want to use a field, you say this field. When you want to use a parameter, I mean, by default, you know that whatever name you give, whatever name you use in a method is a parameter name. So coming back, then let's say, let's make it a task. Rename all parameter names without without how do you call it, pre-text and post-text or something like that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, post-text value. Okay. What else? Username, send keys, enter password, click login. Okay, this is a very minor thing, but for example, in all the other methods, it's good that there's no space between method name and field. And here we have an extra field. We have
I have a question here, because there was a pull request about edit config, right?
yeah.
So after that, all this should be resolved, right?
Exactly. So because last time also when we were using editor config, there were some things that were not sorted, right? So maybe after this review, we will look back into editor config and see there's a setting which can make a difference. Because you're right, that's the whole purpose of editor config, that it should fix problems like this.
Yeah, actually it was fixing. I tested it, like I just gave a lot of spaces and it got fixed. So that's why I thought this is the setting that was done by you. So that's why I didn't change it.
Oh, I know what happened, I think. I know what happened, Rashmi. So what happened is, we said in editor config, it says if you either save, or if it is, let's say, inactive for a couple of seconds, then it formats, or if you lose focus from the ID, then it also auto formats, right?
Yeah.
So it normally works for me because I am using VS Code as my Git tool. So every time I lose focus from IntelliJ to VS Code, it automatically formats that. But let's say if you're working on IntelliJ, and if you directly try to push your code, and maybe you have not saved automatically, then it can happen that your code is yet not formatted because you did not hit Control S.
Okay.
Because that plugin, what the plugin does is, every time you save, it auto formats.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Right? So that could be the reason. But we can always test it after the end of this exercise. Login.click. Okay. Got login title get attribute. This is good. I mean, instead of creating two variables, you directly return from one line, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So anywhere we are only going to use something for one time, the convention that you use is the convention to use. Lockout error, get login, lockout error, login to source demo. And in fact, like we said in the class, we are going to use the word login. We will only use the word login here, right? And there's no confusion because our method is different, field is different. So we can just call it as rename method to login.
But class name and method name will be same, right?
Yeah, that's no problem. Because the differentiator is, we know that in Java everything is which is lowercase is a method or a field, and everything that is starts with the Pascal case is a class name. So then there's no confusion. Control X. Okay, and again you will do the same thing, right? You will remove parameters.
Yeah, that was.
And in fact, you see here you took that example. You're saying take this username, give this value. In fact, no, because this is a method. And when you're within a class, you can freely access other methods, right? You don't have, when you're within a class and you have a couple of methods, even if those methods are private or public or whatever, you don't have to use this. You can simply say, for example, in this case,
Set username.
Everything. Yeah, you can just say set username. Username is enough. We don't have to give this dot method name. Okay, and that reminds me actually that the other thing that I forgot to mention is like our fields should be private. We have to see, so you'll have two kind of methods. You will have methods that you really want to use in our test, and you have methods that will help you make a test, right? And then, so for example, when we look into the test class, let's go to the test class, we'll come back, but let's just quickly look into the test class. So what I saw was that you are only going to use the login method. And in the login method, you pass username password, right?
Yeah.
So you don't really have to
make others possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Because what will happen is, let's quickly take an example. So if you do login dot, it's showing all the methods like click login, get login title. And the idea is in the test, we want to only put our intentions, right? And not the implementation. And it will also help if rather than getting all these things, all these things, we only get the methods that we're interested in. So it will help you speed up your build process. Cool. So let's go back. Where are we? So let me make a note here. Except this method that we want to use in our test, make all other methods private so that they don't show up in IntelliSense. Pop up. Okay, what else? One minor thing. Remove the extra space, but again, this should be taken care by. Ideally, should be taken care by editor config. Yep. Hello.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I thought I lost you. Okay, so this was done. What else? Then you have other file which is about the login test. Login. Okay, I mean we are going to basically remove this class now because
we don't need that file.
Correct, but it was a good idea to keep it because at least then I could refer to it and I can at least for the sake of demo I could show this is how it looked like in the past, with duplicate code, and now we are going to get rid of it because you have something better.
Yeah.
So we will say but. But I think this also brings an important point, which is not critical for the design, but I think which is critical for how Git works. So let's say you have your login test class here, and you're making your login test with PageFactory, right?
Mm-hmm.
If in the past, at least what I've seen is if you try to, let's say, delete this class, and if you try to rename it as login test, sometimes Git can get confused. So what a good idea is, what a good idea is first to delete this class, and the way we delete anytime a class is not, let's say, just delete, but you always have to go to refactor and then say save delete.
Okay.
And by save delete, let's say, I mean, in this case, it's a test class. So, well, it's just only one class. But let's say if you are deleting uh, a domain class, then you want to make sure that this class is not used in multiple places. Because if it is used in multiple places, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
So you always use refactor, save delete.
Okay.
But for now, because we want to delete this login test and we want to rename this class to login test, the steps that you have to follow is, let me write down those steps. The steps.
So should I delete that, or do you want to?
Yeah, you have to delete, but I'll add the steps how you can delete.
Okay.
So steps to follow. First, delete this class, stage and commit this, right? Now, since you're stage and commit this, Git knows that you want to,
Okay. Now I get it. Okay.
So Git knows that this is what you've done. Now you can rename your login test source lab to login test.
Okay.
Yep. And then you stage and commit, and everything should be fine. And everything should, everything should be fine. And to recommit.
So this is only about committing, right? I don't have to push it to the class, the in-between stage.
No. So I mean, when you're making all the changes, then you can push them to the server.
Yeah.
Another thing,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, but you want to ask something?
No, I just wanted to say that one more thing that I introduced newly in this is that before each and after each.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
But we can come to that later.
Yes, and that was awesome. I like that. Other thing is, for example, for this source demo login class, now since we have reviewed it, normally what we do is, so we keep all our pages and domains related things in source, and we only keep our test in the test.
Okay.
So for example, this could have gone in main com source demo under Java. So let me also make that remark. That goes here. That was the first thing.
Yeah, that also, I did think about it. I was a bit confused.
Okay. No, but that's fine, right? I mean, we're doing it for the first time. So in fact, if you make a mistake, Rashmi, and then you correct it, my experience is you'll remember it. If you, and trust me, all the things that you've done correct this time, you might make a mistake in the future. That can happen. So yeah. Move the package to source and test. We only keep test.
And another question was, again, you said because we know that it's source demo, we don't need to use source demo again. So if you go back to the repository, so this pages also, is it okay if I just name it as login?
Exactly.
And in that case, will it be okay to have two login classes, one under test folder and one under the source main folder?
So that's a good question. So basically, in the test class, your test class name is login test, and in the demo, your class name will be login.
Just login.
So there's no conflict.
Okay.
But that's a good point. Yeah.
But again, my question is, we cannot have two classes with the same name, right?
At least not in the same package.
Source folder.
Yeah. If I remember correct, that's how it should be. We can do a quick test. Let's do Java class. And if you
Not
want,
here, not here. I want you to check in the main under Java. There, if you can
yeah,
create another.
yeah,
Oh,
it allows. So as long as they are not in the same package, you can do that.
oh, okay.
But it's not a good idea to, at least in the same
Yeah,
project,
yeah.
to have classes, because what will happen is so even though there's no problem, but I can give an example. So let's say in our project we want to, let's say, test a party, right? So I have a pages for party. Now I also want to assert my party pages object with what I have in my database, and let's say the database table name is also party. Now for all practical purposes, I can create pages party, and I can have a package called database, and I can have party there, right? There's no problem. But the problem would be when I'm writing my test, your test becomes a little bit less readable, because I'm saying party dot, set a field, or party dot get value from the table. So it becomes a little bit more less readable for you and the people who have to work on it. Which party are we talking about?
Yeah.
So then probably I would call it as party table, to make it clear that we're talking about party table and not, let's say, party page.
Okay. And I think this is a stupid question, but still, I'm assuming when a team starts working on these projects, either a test automation project or let's say project like web application development, this all should be part of the design process, right? To think about, will that be part of design process to think about what all classes would be there and
Exactly.
what the names should be and what all actions and methods should be there?
Exactly. So I mean, and yeah, should I say, this is what we are doing now. We are trying to come up with a good design. So we started with the example from Sauce Labs, which we already discussed that, it's not a good production grade kind of example. Maybe Sauce Lab just wanted to show people how to run certain things. But then we actually took it as an example of how an ugly code looks like. Quite frankly, I wanted to rename our test as the first attempts as our ugly login test, because if somebody is looking at them, we don't want them to see that, oh, it's an example on this repo, let me use this example, and only rename our example to a proper name like a login test once we have removed all the ugliness out of it. Maybe we should do that. That if somebody wants to look into this and into this test, they know that we know that this is an ugly example. So let's call our test as let's call our test, because you are already seeing that what we did in the last time with this example, and what we did just only after introducing page object model, it's already making a huge difference, right? And we still have not covered all the areas. So if we go back, where was it? Yeah, let's call our test class as let's rename this. So let's rename our class as ugly login test, and we will rename it later when we have removed all ugliness out of it. Make sense?
Yeah.
So that if anyone is looking at this class now, they know it's not a good example. It's actually a bad example. Let's go back.
So you mean for the PageFactory also, like this one also you want me to do it as ugly?
No, the PageFactory is good. So what you've done in PageFactory?
The other one, but anyway we're going to delete it, right?
So let me know what I mean is, let me delete this. So we have this PageFactory. This is already good. This is how you will create a PageFactory. Once we
my question.
Oh, you mean this one?
Login test with PageFactory.
Yeah. So it is still ugly, because I mean we still have some ugliness in it which we want to get rid of. Like for example, this thing and this thing. We can still get rid of it. Let's see. So So we will rename this as our ugly login test.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay, let's go back. What else? Okay. So now let's look into our login test class. Login test with, and again we don't have to call it as, yeah, we already know what we'll call it. So we don't have to mention, for example, but I know.
Yeah. This is temporary.
Correct. Yeah. So we remove the space, remove the space. So we remove the extra space.
So can you make it space?
What do you mean? Oh, space. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll remove the extra space. Rename method to our ugly login test.
You already gave this comment somewhere, right?
Yeah, I think I gave it in the wrong place. So.
Okay.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
I'll just make a comment, not a task. Web triangle. So again, we have to make all these fields private, and this also applies to applies here. So not only the fields, but also the driver. Driver also private. Yep. Let's come down. Okay. So driver to be private. Control X. And normally what we can also do, so for example, when we are source demo login, just give me a moment, Rashmi. And normally what we could have done in this case, Rashmi, because we already have the driver, let's see, or maybe not. So let me go back to this code example. So you define a variable, you get the instance of driver, you create a driver, login. You could actually initialize. So again, login is a variable of type source demo login, right? So it should be camel case, so not with Pascal case, because now it can get confusing that this is a class, and if somebody is looking at this, they might actually think that we are working with a login class and a static login method, but this is not a static method, right? So let me make a comment on that.
But you have already given those comments, right? When I refactor it there, all this will change automatically.
Yeah, but I mean, just so that you don't forget. Because then you might still get it skipped. So login should be login. And we can initialize. In fact, I mean, what we're seeing here is when we are doing this initialization of login, we are doing it in 2 times. So maybe we can refactor it. And the way we can refactor it is in our before each method, you can actually do this thing can come out, and you can, for example, do it here.
How about if I do this while
while you're here?
Declare here.
You can do it if you are able to get a driver instance, because what will happen is in Java.
I understand.
Yeah. So the fields are initiated first. So it will try to initiate. So what it will do is, if you do, for example, here login is equals to this, it will say, oh, I depend on driver. So let me first go to driver, and at this moment your driver is null.
Yeah.
So you will not be able to initialize it.
Got it. Yeah.
But again, we will see that in future, this is actually what we will do. So what we will do is instead of getting our instance in the before each, we will get our instance here.
Okay.
And then with that instance, you will be able to do this.
Okay.
But until then, we keep it like this.
Yeah.
Let's see, go back and we say, for example, move up, move login initialization to before each method. Yeah. In future, we will do it at field level, but for now, this is good enough. Okay. What else? So let me go back to the PR. Before each, and we already know, we have issues for this, that now our tests are tightly coupled to Chrome. In the future,
yeah.
I think also this.
That and also the URL should be.
Yeah, it should be one, the URL should be part of configuration. Yeah. But another thing I think is going to driver.get URL. This is a part of login thing, right? This is basically our login page. So if I go to this, you land into a login page.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I think we can take this URL out of here, and we can just we can make it a part of our login test. So when we are saying login to source demo, you actually would need, let's say, go to URL, and now login steps below. Steps are already below. Yeah. Yep. So that can be done. Yep. Okay. So let's go back and let's see. And then you also know that, for example, this configuration will also become a part of your login class and not the test class, which also makes sense from a separation of concerns point of view, because from a test perspective, you don't care about, even if we say, okay, we are getting it from a configuration, why are we talking about configuration, right? Because all you want to talk about is go to login page and login. It's like how BAs talk. They don't care about go to the login page URL and navigate and whatever. So these two things, yeah. These two lines.
That's a bit tricky.
Yeah. Not really.
About it, that this could go.
Yeah. Yeah. So these two lines belong to login class. So can be moved there. Control X and review comment. Okay, so once you move this, then you already know that you are already redirected. When you will call your login method in the before class, you are already redirected. Then when you call your login thing, so you know that either. So now I'm also giving a little bit of solution here, and that is either you can make this as a part of login to source demo, or you can make the navigation of going to URL as a part of your constructor, because you know that in the login class, after you have initialized all the elements, the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to the URL, right? So for example, this part can either stay here or it can go here, is what I'm saying. But maybe it still makes sense to keep it here. because then you're still initializing it here, and yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Or maybe not, because when you're talking about these fields, you need that URL. Correct?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're saying we want to talk about username, password, login, you need that URL. And the first thing is the constructor will be set up first. So the constructor will make sure that you already, this will make sure that your elements have a valid URL already.
But it is working even without this, right? So it doesn't really need.
Yeah, it's like a lazy initialization, so it will not care. But it still makes sense if we initialize it. Then yeah, then it's just from a design point of view, it seems better that you're on a login page, and at least you're on the login page.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Because the goal of constructor is to basically set your class for whatever it needs, and that is what we're doing. So we set it for the driver, we initialize the elements, and in fact you can probably go to the URL here and then initialize the element.
Okay.
I think this makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, you can also try out different things and see what works, what not.
Right.
So there's no hard and fast rule here. Let's go back. So this is good, and in fact, if you remember, let's make a task. This actually addresses one of our issues. One of our issues that failing tests did not close the browser. Remember?
Yeah.
So this is good. What else? After each parameterized test, login. So this line goes up. This becomes small, that we already discussed.
Yeah.
Let's see. Because for a moment I was confused. I thought that you're initializing the login here, and my first impression was, will this even work? Because you're initializing, but there's no variable name, and are these methods static? So I got confused. But
yeah.
Okay, and I think I already gave a remark that, or I did not. So parameters. This is in test. The other one was in domain class. Parameters are to be camel case. So the username and password. That's another thing. Let's see if I can see something from here. Username, password, login, get login. Yeah. The other thing which I was only able to see when I opened IntelliJ, I was not able to see this. When I was reviewing from here, everything looked okay. The thing is this convention of first giving expected and then giving actual. You see, IntelliJ is showing this is actual. This is a convention for JUnit 4. But in JUnit 5, I don't know why they did it, but they reversed this convention. So they actually first give actual and then they give expected. How do you know that is the case? You see, it is calling this hard-coded expected value as actual. You see?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, when I switched from JUnit 4 to JUnit 5, I always made this mistake. So next time,
even when I looked at it, I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's like, and this is where IntelliJ, can help us. So when we're doing assert equals, for a moment, it will tell you, for example, first expected, then actual, and then message.
Yeah.
And I can imagine why JUnit 5 did this, because imagine in the past, if you use this convention, it was first giving it was first giving a message, in fact, and then it was giving actual and then expected, right? So it was first giving a message which was like, if things go wrong, this is the message, right? And then they were saying, this is my expected. Now everything is wrong, right? Because you see this is expected actual, but this is JUnit 4. And then they say, this should be my expected.
No, this is the actual.
Yeah. But what was happening was, because of this, because the message length was varying, left and right, normally the variables are of similar size. This was resulting into very ugly looking assert statements. So by moving first expected message, then actual, and normally expected is also a variable name. So by putting first as expected, then as actual, and then as message name, the assert statements become much more readable. So I think that's the only reason I can imagine why JUnit did it.
Okay.
So let me make a note of it. And JUnit 5, I always get confused. It is expected first, actual later. So hard coded values come first, and then application value. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, but I think if you look at this, apart from the fact that we have this driver tied up to our test class, since we already removed the configuration from test, we at least moved our ugliness from test to our page object, right? And our tests are already looking much more readable. I think the only thing that is still missing is basically some spacing. So let me also give a comment here. So give spacing, Control X, give spacing between tests to make them more readable. So for example, when this line is gone, in fact, we do a login. Once you have done the login, then probably you will get the title, and then it's okay to just assert title with, so you don't have to give an extra spacing here, because this line will go away. And this is what we will be left with. So let's see, log into this. Yeah. So I think our tests are much more readable. We're just saying, what we're saying is, in fact, if you remove this, we are saying login with username, password. And in fact, we can also remove this login error. So normally the idea that we use, if you're going to use something, let's say 2 times or more, then you make a variable from it. If not, you can actually use the method name.
I can directly give that.
Right. Because that, if you remember, that is exactly what you did when you gave this return statements. Right?
So I can do that for both, right?
You can do that for both.
Not just for error, but also for the page title.
Yes. So for both page title and error, you can do it as, so first is expected. So you will first say products, comma, login dot. And in fact, you don't even have to say get login title, because you're already in the login page. So that's a good point. Let me make a note of that.
What do you mean? I didn't understand.
So then we have to go back to our So the thing is, here we're not saying enter login username or enter login password, right? Because you're already in the login class. So then you can just say as get title, get logout error. But get login logout error maybe still makes sense, because but maybe we can change the title to as login with, where is it? So this becomes this becomes just get title, since we are already on login page. Okay. Let's go back. Right. The other thing was we said we can remove this, right? Yeah. Minute string login error, string page. Since page title is really only used once, we can move the method to assert statement. Attribute title. So how will our test looks like? Our test will look like login.login username password, assert equals products, comma, login.get title, which is pretty readable. Two-liner from what did we had in the past? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 lines.
But we have a lot of things in the source demo login. Okay, you cannot ignore that.
That's correct. So basically making readable code does not mean that
it looks neat. Yeah.
Exactly. So readable does not mean that we can get rid of implementation. It just means that everything is in its right place. Sometimes it can also happen that when you're trying to make more readable code, you might actually have more lines of code, but that's no problem because imagine if we have 20 tests here, and if somebody has to maintain them in the future, it will be more work for that person to go from here.
Yeah.
And even though we might have more lines of code, put here and here together, it might still be easier to maintain it. But at least our tests are only showing our intentions, right? It is not showing any test implementation. All the test implementation is now a part of our source demo logic class.
Yeah.
So I think it's already looking very good, Rashmi.
Yeah, I was also already quite happy when I did this. But after your review, it looks even better.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. These are the most important activities. This pull request reviews. So I also have my colleagues, and every time I make something. So for example, I have this colleague called Kasya. She's very good in with Java concepts and also with clean code concepts. So even when I think I'm doing awesome stuff, she will always find something to give a review comment, and which makes
people like that
exactly because otherwise, I mean, if you share a link, if you put this project on your GitHub, and if you share this link, as a resume thing, if somebody reads this test class, they already like you. Then if somebody has put this login test class, so I think if you correct all these review comments, what is the next thing that you want to pick? I think, in my opinion, we can actually either pick moving our configuration, or we can making our tests independent of what kind of browser we want to work with it. But I'll leave it to you.
I'm interested in both of the things, so we can pick anything.
What do you want to pick next?
Let's pick the driver part.
Yeah, let's pick the driver part.
To make it independent of the browser.
Makes sense, because I think that's a bigger thing than changing the configuration. So
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So this parameterized test, right? Like in this case, this is okay because just we had two users to test with.
Right.
But what if we have some kind of test where we have, actually I have two questions. One is, if we have a bigger list of data to use, then it doesn't make sense to put everything inside a class like this, right? So there must be a solution where we can probably reference to a file or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So like you said, so there are two things. One is, let's say even if this list becomes big, so let's say even if these are 12 test data elements.
Yeah.
Imagine if this field is only going to be used with this one test, right? And if this list will never change depending on whatever environment you use. So if you're running on local host or on CI, if this list is not going to change, from a clean code perspective, it still makes sense to keep these two things with minimum separation. So to keep two related things closer to each other. But imagine that you're working with user IDs and passwords that are environment dependent. At least like what we had in AB Namro, right? We have different environments, and each environment will have its own user ID. In that case, even if it was one username and test, it makes sense to take it out and put into its own configuration. The second thing is, it might look like that we have our test data hard coded in the test, which generally is not a good thing. In this case, it is a good thing. Why? Because, well, like we said, the test data is tightly coupled to this one test and only one test. It is not going to change an environment. It makes sense to keep these two things together because it makes it more readable. But we will also cover in future, for example, how to make test data decoupled from a test. For example, let's say if you are inserting title of a person and you had multiple test classes where you always want to give first, a name and a title and nationality of a person. So then title will be reused in multiple places and you want to take it out and put in its own configuration. So that's another concept that we will learn probably after we have done driver configuration. Then we'll pick up how to decouple your test data from the test.
And just one more last question related to this test data. Let's say I'm testing some app where there are like hundreds of products,
Right.
And I'm trying to, I don't know, let's say just add a few products to test the shopping experience. Then I'm not particular about what product.
Correct. Yeah.
In every test, I want to
some
use
product.
Random some product.
Correct.
So that also we can do. So like
exactly.
List of hundreds.
Right.
And then
randomly pick a product, right? Because we don't want to hard code it. Because if you only keep one, then we have this pesticide effect. Maybe one of the products gives problem, right? We can do that, and we will do that. I mean, that's also something that we are doing in our project. So what we do is we have a list of countries that, for example, we want to give for nationality, and rather than always giving one country, we randomly pick a country, and it should work. And we will do that.
That's also something I'm not interested in.
Right. Maybe you can make a feature, Rashmi. So let's go to GitHub. Let's do that right away. So because I'm not sure if in the list of issues we have added that. So let's make just a new issue. And it's not really issue, it's a feature. And when we say feature, and we say for test data, when we use how do we say custom test data, we want to be able to randomly pick data from a list of valid data values, right? Cool. Okay, what else? Let me just quickly do a last look and see if I'm missing something or not.
Can you approve the other one?
Yeah, let's do that.
That's just the parallel.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's look at that. Files change. It's a main resources. Yes. Enable true. Parallel mode default true. Class default concurrent. Okay, cool. Review changes. Approve. So this is also something for the viewers. We did this in the last class. That without this, maybe I can just show them. Without this, if I want to run these two tests, if I run this test class, these tests will run in sequence. Let's see. So for example, first it will run. So first it ran the first test, then it's running the second test. And now we will approve this PR. Approve. I will pull the changes. Squash and merge. Confirm squash and merge. So this PR is merged. Now I can go back. Let's say go to Git. Let's check out Download. can shell them. Yeah, smart checkout. Smart checkout is nothing but doing basically a git stash. That's okay. No, just remove them. So yeah. So now develop is checked out. Let's go to terminal and we do a git pull. And now if I do a run, where is it? Login test. So these are our previous tests. And now if we run this test, they should all run in parallel. Run login test. Oh, run. Run. Yep, you can see all of them are running in parallel. So that's the feature that Rashmi just incorporated by implementing parallel run. Okay, so all the tests finish almost at the same time. Okay. What else? Let me just quickly look at it for the last time and see if there are any more review comments. If not, then we can close it. Click login. Go down, go down, go down. I think then everything else looks okay, right, Rashmi?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it looks okay. The only thing
let's
that
do one thing. Let me make these changes, then you can look at it from a fresh perspective and see more improvements.
Yes, but I forgot to mention. We said that we will look at the editor config, right? So maybe you can share.
Oh yeah.
I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll make you a host. So participants. What? Close participants. So what do I do? Right click on this or invite?
Yeah.
Invite.
Sorry. Just go to the participants.
Yeah.
And there are 3 more. Click on that, and you should get an option.
More. Yeah. Make host. Okay. And now we can see why editor config was not working, because all those formatting things that we saw in the PR, those should already be handled by something called editor config that we introduced in one of the previous videos.
Okay, develop is checked out. But I still don't see resources here. I have to do git pull, I think.
Yes. But which branch are you on? Can you do a git branch?
No, I'm on develop right now.
Oh, you're on develop. Okay.
Because the
resources was on a branch.
Add editor config, that was already merged.
Right, that was already merged. Right.
So it should be here now, right?
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah. So what do you want to check now?
But are you saying the editor config was not there?
No, it was always there, but my question is why wasn't it working on the...
Oh, right. So let's go to a branch. Maybe the branch, yeah. Check out, yeah.
Because that's where you notice that there were a lot of spaces.
Right.
Here.
And
yeah.
Let me see a moment. Why is it full screen?
So also, for example, here, did you make the config like this? Like if it's a one-liner?
Oh no, we removed that, right?
Right, yeah, that's what I thought. So, see, when I do this, it changes to this.
Yeah.
But again, when I open it right now, see, everything I've changed to...
Can you go back to editor config? Let's see what it says.
The file or the configuration?
The file, the editor config file. Because maybe there's another setting in IntelliJ that we have to say that, we want to use that. Okay. And say one line, just search for control F one line. One line method should be false. One, search, enter, or just one. Yeah, let's see. You can find Java doc do not wrap.
This is false. This should be true, right?
Do not wrap if one line. True. Yeah, make it true.
Should I change it here?
Yeah, here. Oh, no, not in the develop done. Yeah, it's in the page object, right? You can do it.
It's in the page object.
Yeah, because then you can push this and then, yeah. You can also approve it.
Okay.
Now if you go back, I think it should already, if you go back, yeah. Make the change, make it one liner. Yeah. And if you click somewhere out, let's see what happens now. Outside IntelliJ.
Right now.
Outside IntelliJ, if you click somewhere else, and if you go back, does it work? Is it fine?
Yeah, it looks like it's fine.
It did not roll back, right?
I'll just close. Yeah, just close it.
Yeah.
No, it did not move.
It did not, right? So it's working fine.
Yeah.
So the property was not set correctly. Okay.
And also for the spacing, then maybe.
Yeah, you can also look for space or maybe line. It's like adding a line. It's not a space. Java line command adds a line. Java line comment. Java line comment add space. No. Next. Keep Java doc. No, just Java doc. Not for doc. Java.
And see here, this one. Java doc keep empty lines. Should this be true? Should it keep?
If you make it false, but this is for the Java doc.
Okay.
So I think this will not affect this.
So what should we look for?
Let's look for method, because we don't want to give an extra line after method. So you just give method.
Yeah. Keep simple methods in one line. Okay, that is false. I just come from the beginning. Yeah. Method.
Multi-line method, parentheses.
Okay, Java blank lines around method is equal to 1.
Yeah, that we want. This is around method.
Yeah.
So between methods, we want one line.
Before method body, 0. Okay.
It's okay, because around we anyways have one.
Keep simple methods in one line. That's okay.
No. Next. No. Next.
I think this is all.
Call parentheses. Yeah, maybe we'll do some Google search. Can you just do a quick Google search? Just add a config to start method from start. Editor. Yeah, start. Add the config from first line. To start from first line. First line. Code formatting, editor config, first line, no. Let's try and see if you change the Java docs, if you change it to remove empty lines, let's see what happens. Keep empty lines. Yeah. If you make it false.
But that is already true, right?
No, this is to keep empty lines. Yeah. Let's see what happens. If you go back, you have empty lines, but if you click somewhere else, no, I mean outside IntelliJ, or if you do Control S.
Yeah, I did Control S.
Okay. So this did not make a difference.
No.
I think I will look for it later, Rashmi.
Sure.
Because this is a minor thing. We should be able to find it.
Okay.
Maybe in the next session. We can make an issue for it. Let's make an issue.
No, that's okay. I think my only point was then was like I had already pulled this merge project which had editor config. Still, there are so many issues about empty spaces, right?
Right.
I'm just wondering
Because I think we have either that we are not able to find that setting. Maybe it's worded differently, so once you find it, then probably it works fine.
Okay.
So that can be the only reason, because it seems editor config is working correctly. Like when we change the setting.
It is. Yeah, it is working. Yeah.
Cool. So good progress, Rashmi. We're making good progress.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So for now, I will work on all the comments. I think that will take some time.
Yeah.
From the pull request.
Yeah.
And share it back.
And maybe we can skip tomorrow's session, because tomorrow is our sprint planning day, so it's going to be a very long day.
Okay.
And it will, it's like too many meetings, and I think it will take you some time to properly, take the driver logic out of test.
Yeah.
So that would at least take 1 or 2 days. So take your time, and then we can again do it on Tuesday.
And that I'm also I would like to understand again, because some things that you mentioned, I still need to look at it, like why certain lines can go back to the pages, PageFactory page. And there also you had some comment about, like, for example, in providing the URL and initiating the browser. Right. It can also, so I'll just also look at those things to understand.
Right.
And maybe experiment with it.
Right. And if you get some time, if you have some time, and if you want to, let's say, read some books about this, I would recommend this book, Clean Code.
Yeah, that I've already made a note.
Awesome.
I was just wondering, I wanted to buy it. Yeah. Then I was thinking, actually, I wanted to ask this, like, do you think already as a beginner I will be able to understand the book, or I was just wondering, maybe if people who already know coding, they look at it, then they will understand, because a lot of clients I will probably not even understand what those clients are doing. So
that's okay. I think
I'll be able to follow.
I mean, when I read this book, I had not done any Java projects in Java. Okay. The only thing which I've done is I don't know if I read it before or after reading that Java for Testers book from Evil Tester. What's his name? Richard. Yeah, I'm forgetting his name. So I'm not sure when did I read the book, but and like you said, so there were some things which I felt were, oh, this is complex. I've never experienced this, but there were some things which I could get, and even knowing those things helped me make much better code, when I went to my next company. But if you find something difficult, just read it, move forward. Don't stick to it, just because maybe when you pick that book again after 2-5 years, then you understand better. Because I again want to order that book and read it, because I read it last time online and I like that book. And maybe Clean Code book. Because I'm sure if I read it again, I will still get a lot of things which I missed, when I read it for the first time.
Yeah. No, but my only question was, I understand that maybe some parts I won't understand, but would it be the entire book was what I was wondering. But if you think that I can still give it a go, then I was also thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, if you have time, but take it more like it as a bedtime reading. Don't take it as your main approach. Don't spend too much time on it, because what we are doing now will give you the most learning. And no book can give you that. But if you do it as a bedtime learning for half an hour or 1 hour, then it will also help you learn other things that we might not touch, in our sessions.
Right. Also, is that book focusing on Java or in general?
In general. I mean, even though the examples are taken based on Java, but you can apply those principles in any programming language.
Okay. And this Java for Testers, is it the same one? It says by Alan Richardson.
Alan Richardson, yes, that's the name. Yeah, Richardson. Yeah.
Is that a good book as well?
That's a good book. In fact, if you remember when we started with our example, the source demo example says you have a class, you have a main method, and I said don't use a main method in test. I mean, normally the developers use a main method because they want to have an entry point for their program. We want to run all our tests in parallel. We don't care about the main method. our test looks like what they look now, right?
Yeah.
We just have login, we just have test without any main method. So I learned a lot of good things from that book. So that was my first book on Java. And it will also teach you a lot of concepts which you will need when you are actually building your test. And I think it's a very easy read. I was able to finish it in 1 week or so, and I'm pretty sure you can also finish it in 1 week or so with doing examples.
Okay.
And not too costly also. If I remember, it was $10 or something like that. Not too costly also. It was $10 or something when I bought it.
Yeah, in Amazon it's like paperback is like 2,000 rupees or something.
2,000 rupees?
500.
Yeah, but that's close to $10, right? I don't know.
I see.
Alan Richardson, Java for testers. Yeah, there's the book. I think I got the ebook. Yeah, that was like the minimum price is $10. So if you reduce the price from LeanPub, you can get it in $10. You don't really need a paperback version for it because with ebook you can actually copy paste and try code.
Yeah.
Paperback you cannot.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool, Rashmi. So then I'll see you again on Tuesday, and then we'll make our code much more readable than what it is. Awesome.
Alright, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a nice evening.
You too. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you. Cheers. Bye bye.